Part of a 600-year Polish vodka-making tradition, Belvedere vodka is all natural and made with 100% non-GMO Polska rye and pristine water. Belvedere has championed Polska rye vodka and superior natural ingredients since its inception and continues their mission with its new Belvedere Single Estate Rye Series. These award-winning vodkas, Smogary Forest and Lake Bartenjek, are two distinct tasting vodkas born from unique terroir and expert craftsmanship. Speaking of craftsmanship, I think you'll really enjoy listening to today's guest, Zach Lowe, who is one of the ultimate craftsmen in the media game. Taste the difference and enjoy Belvedere's new single estate rye vodkas on the rocks or in a delicious cocktail today. Belvedere is a quality choice. Drinking responsibly is too. All right, welcome to this week's episode of the JJ Redick podcast. We have a few shows lined up. I apologize for the long break in between shows, just trying to enjoy my off season and prepare for my third straight summer of free agency. I think by now everyone knows my thoughts on free agency, but I am excited, and I want to just get straight into my conversation with Zach. Lots to unpack. Here we go. And we're now joined by Zach Lowe. Zach, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You came on my podcast with Yahoo a few years ago, and you're a two-time guest of the JJ Redick podcast.
Is that it? Is that all it is?
That's all it is. I think I've been on yours like 7 times.
No, it's not that many. But I owe you one, at least one more after this.
Yeah, you do owe me one. And I'm glad that I got you at this time of year. This time of year, to me, might be the best time of year for the NBA. There's three sort of periods, I would say, that I really enjoy. And one is the trade deadline. 2 is the playoffs and the finals. Although at times over the last few years, those have been sort of anticlimactic. And then 3rd, sort of the draft and the lead up, and then the first few days of free agency.
Well, really, that's all. The last 2 are just all one thing now. Playoffs till now, there's just no. It's just all one.
It all
continuous 3-month extravaganza.
For you, what is your favorite time of year? I think there has to be a separation though between the draft and free agency and the playoffs, just because the playoffs are an actual product on the court, like something's happening on the court. Whereas, the draft and free agency is just acquisition, movement, and hope.
I like the first week of the season when you get to see like all this stuff you've been thinking about all summer, like, oh, that's how it looks. That's this coach's first crack at this new roster. That's kind of fun. I love the finals. I don't love being away from my family for the entirety of it, but there is something about being just the back and forth, the travel, it's grueling, but there's just something about you feel like you're in the series and this is the only thing that matters. And you're with it the whole time. You're at every practice, every shoot around. It was a little bit of a bummer that some of the AD stuff and other stuff took away from the finals this year. Cause I like when the finals is like sacred. It's the only show in town. So I like the finals. This is fun. It's easy to get a little, I can't imagine living it, but it's easy to look ahead and get like preemptively stressed out about how much stuff there's going to be. Like, do I have to react to every signing? I'm not good at just like, let this wash over me and just have fun with it.
As a player, you're definitely not either. Even last week, we were supposed to do the podcast a week ago today, and Mike Conley got traded, and you had to write an article. And I said, let's do it next week or whatever. It just seems like there's always sort of something happening in the NBA. August is the one down period of time. I keep going back to like, as a player, you can sort of get frustrated by sort of the lack of purity at times of basketball and like why you actually love the sport. And at times I sort of have to remind myself that I am taxed as an entertainer. And that's ultimately what we're doing. I don't know, that's sort of fucked up, but that's kind of our reality. It's like almost WWE at times. And for whatever reason, it feels like the last, call it 3 to 5 years, has only amplified that.
That's why I like the finals as a relief from that, because it's like you go to the finals and you're like, this is to play in this game. Like there's no nonsense. You can't. It's hard to be limited at any part of the game and play in that game. Like the last time I was in Philly actually was for Game 6 of your series against the Raptors, which you won. And I was in my hotel room. I was in my hotel lobby, and I saw Lloyd Pierce there, the Hawks coach. I was like, "What the hell is Lloyd Pierce doing here?" He was with Kevin Huerter because he's doing the thing that Brett did in Philly early on. And he's taking all the young Hawks guys to like super high stakes playoff games, sitting on courtside and be like, this is what it looks like, man. Like you want to be in the conference finals in 3 years or 4 years or whatever the Hawks timetable is. Like this is the level of game you got to play in. Cause those games, and you've been in them, like particularly if you ever got to face a team like the Warriors and they got those guys running around, like your level of mental locked inness is like, I can't even imagine it. Like it's mentally draining to watch the game. I can't imagine what it's like to play in like a regular season game in January. That's cool. But like those kind of games, those are awesome.
And then to do it 5, 6, 7 times against the same people over and over again, it's mentally, emotionally, physically draining. LP, when he was at the game with Kevin, like Chris Babcock, who's one of our player development guys with the Sixers, was like, LP is bringing Kevin today, and they're just he wants to watch you warm up. And then they're going to sit near the court and they're going to, take in their first playoff game. I think such a cool experience. So your power rankings then go playoffs,
not
playoffs, finals, finals. Okay, finals.
Last 2 rounds of the playoffs.
Finals, first week of season.
No, if this is better than the first week of the season. I just want to give the early season a little shout out. Like here, this is back. Like this is what it looks like.
But
like,
the first week of the season can be so misleading. It can be so misleading.
But that's part of the fun of it.
And also, this is the thing from my perspective. Like, there's what is it? Recency bias.
Yeah.
So like a guy will come out in first 5 games and just be on fire, and it'll be like January and he's shooting under 40% from the field, and people will be like, "Oh, he's having a great season," because of what he did right at the beginning. And then there's guys that get overlooked because maybe they get off to a slow start, and then you look up. Like you've said this to me before. I think one of my years in LA, I got off to a really slow start. You texted me. You were going to be in one of the cities we were getting ready to play in, and you texted me. You were like, "Dude, I thought you were having a bad shooting season. You're shooting 41% from 3."
It happened to Clay this year too. Although it came fast in the second half of the season. God. All of a sudden, Clay was like shooting 41%. And you're like, okay, well, Clay's like early season shooting struggles that were supposedly a thing were not a thing.
Yeah. All right. So this is second after the finals. Free agency draft.
Yeah. This is better. This to me is better than the trade deadline. I like this better than the trade deadline for a transactional. I don't know why. I just like this better. This was a good trade deadline because you actually had the deals where like, okay, the good teams are loading up. Like Marc Gasol, Mirotic, Tobias. A couple days before. Yeah.
It's for a player, it's a gift and a curse, this player movement, right? Because it's exciting for the league. I think you can sort of get out of situations easier than maybe you would be if you got locked in. But then at the same time, like, I think there's a lot of guys that basically for the foreseeable future, unless something changes with the cap or strategy of teams, like we're going to be locked into short-term deals. And that's just, to me, that's the new normal. Like obviously 2016 was an anomaly, but the weird part about 2016 was guys were getting 4-year deals. And
almost all of which ended badly.
Right. And then some of it was just straight overpaying, but some of it was certainly giving out 4-year deals to guys that shouldn't have got 4-year deals. And the pendulum to me is like swung so far the other way. And I'm interested to see, this is what I'm interested in. We were talking down in the lobby. This is what I'm interested to see is the teams that are going after the big guys, right? Do they then move to second tier guys and give them 4-year deals or even 3-year deals? Or do they only give them 1-year, 2-year deals? And there's going to be a whole lot of really good players, I think, that are going to face the same sort of new normal that I've faced the last 2 summers, which is like, you're going to be on a short-term deal. It doesn't really necessarily mean they're older or it's not going to age well. They're just teams like having this flexibility now.
Particularly teams in certain markets. Like that's all the Knicks noise is. Well, if we don't get these guys, we'll do Cousins 1 year, 20. We'll do like, I don't know if they would even do like D'Angelo Russell for 4 years, even though he's 23 and he's theoretically like a guy you should want on your team for the next 4 years. I mean, that's an interesting name. But I was going over with someone in a front office yesterday. He literally read me like 40 different names and was like, how much do you think these guys are going to make? And we just went bam, 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 bam. And it's all guys like third tier guys maybe. And I was like, first of all, it was a great exercise because like, man, there are just a ton of free agents. And second, and even though there's so much cap room, there's going to be so many guys that are decent players that fall through the cracks. We're going to get to the end of free agency. It's going to be like, wait a second. Why did that dude get 12 and that guy got 3? Like what, like he was like Wes Matthews. What does Wes Matthews get? And I was like, I don't know. Damari Carroll. And I was like, 4, 8, 12, 1. Like, I don't even like, what is the rhyme or reason to any of this? There's so many dudes. Like, it's literally almost half the league.
I think there's going to be a lot of that this summer. Those variables I think are always at play, like the timing of everything, sort of waiting to see how chips fall. There's always guys that sort of are in that position. This summer though, there's two things at play. You have all these teams and really like a lot of big market teams that have sort of saved up this cap space, and their motivation behind it is not just to get good players, right? It's like we're all in or bust. Like you mentioned the Knicks, and it's like and Clippers could be in the same boat, let's say.
Yeah.
Where if they don't get one of the top tier 1 guys, they just hand out a 1-year deal, and there's this slow patience. So as a player, again, I'm just from my perspective, like at some point, you've got to like try to be a really good basketball team, and maybe you're not a championship team. And there are certain teams that, have consistently done that, where they're not sort of, all right, we're going to take the patient approach and we're okay just rolling over this cap space again and again. And we're actually going to go try to get players, because ultimately like the player acquisition piece is huge. And you want guys to be in that position to help build your culture long term. And I think it's at times frustrating for a lot of players now to see, oh, I had a great year, I'm staring at another 1-year deal.
I can imagine that is frustrating. Do I have to move? Do I have to move my family? And to your point, like it's hard to create anything sustainable that way. Like let's say the Knicks go out and sign a bunch of good veterans on 1-year deals and win 35 games next year. Okay, so what are you selling to the next class of free agents? All those guys are already up. Like if your young guys don't get better, you got nothing. That's why the Nets can at least say, hey, look, if we strike out, we have this team that is provably a pretty good team. And we can tell the next group of star players, like this team is already a 45-win team. Like it's a real sustainable team of young. And now some of them are going to have to get paid soon. And like the timing of that stuff is always interesting too. Like you only get so many windows before the rookie contracts are up and all of a sudden you have a stacked salary cap.
Philly is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Where, they sort of kept this cap space, collected assets, and then ultimately we started cashing in on those assets with the Jimmy trade and the Tobias trade. But like knowing that before we made those trades, that really this summer was going to be the last summer to have that sort of flexibility in terms of cap space, and obviously with Ben's extension, assuming Ben gets an extension, then going into next year, you wouldn't have that flexibility.
It's funny though, randomly they picked 2 really good summers. I mean, they didn't end up getting any free agents, but like last summer and this summer turned out to be the biggest ones. We were talking before in the lobby about LeBron and all of this, but like 2 really good summers. Well, they got you back, so I don't know if that counts. Last summer they got you back.
A re-sign.
Yeah, they got you back.
Great. We're talking about free agency and sort of motivation of teams to sort of get to where the Raptors were this year and where the Warriors have been. The motivation is always to win a championship. And like in your mind, which player do you think has the ability to change the NBA landscape the most? The 2 obvious ones, I'm just going to take them away.
Take them off.
Katy and Kawhi, right?
Okay.
We're going to take those guys off. What is the next guy for you? Or maybe a tier of guys?
I mean, it could be a trade guy, right? It could be like, does Bradley Beal ever get moved? Does a team make a play for Bradley Beal? It could be, does Kevin Love ever get moved? Because the next group of free agents, like, I guess the next guy is Jimmy. Like, depending on what Jimmy does, because all the teams flirting with him are already really good teams.
Right.
And so he has the ability to make a good team better and another good team worse by leaving. And he's really good.
He's really good. And also I think he's one of those guys that is perfect for modern NBA playoffs. Like you need guys like him on your team, guys that can create one-on-one, guys that can guard multiple positions.
Yeah.
He's one of a handful of guys that can do that at an elite level. One of the guys for me, and I was actually, now I guess I wasn't surprised, but I was intrigued when Horford opted out, because I think he, to me, is another guy, and maybe he doesn't put up the numbers or that sort of thing that some of these other guys do, but to me can really help a team. And having played a lot against him the last 2 years in Philly, to me, he was the key to their team.
He's a monster. And I
didn't realize how good he was.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
You really didn't? Even as
no, I mean, watching him for the Hawks and, playing in LA or playing against him early in my career and early in his career, when I was in Orlando, just to see the accumulation of knowledge and skills that he has now at this age, it's remarkable. He's really good.
Sometimes you want him to be a little more selfish, or you want the offense designed for him to be a little more selfish. But yeah, he does everything right. He's just helping every possession in the right direction on both ends. And defensively, how many guys in the league can credibly guard Embiid and Giannis? Now, Giannis figured him out by the latter part of that series, but he's still the guy you can put on Giannis and feel like you're not at an enormous disadvantage, which is rare. And he's a guy you can put on, and he gave Joel a lot of problems. And to the degree, I didn't think he could do that to Joel.
If you're Kemba Walker, what do? What do you think is the best situation for him?
Depends what you want, right? If Charlotte is not throwing the boat at him, well, if there's the Supermax boat, which is gone, and he walked off, he jumped off that boat himself by saying, I would take a discount of the Supermax.
Do you think that it's really he said, I don't want the Supermax? I'll be willing to take. I think Kemba's such a nice guy that he was just giving the politically correct answer,
or he was aware that the Supermax was never coming.
Great point.
So then there's the full 5-year boat that the normal one. If they're not coming with that, I just feel like there is no path for Charlotte with him to ever get anything really good. And so if I'm him, I'm 29 years old, I'm really, really good. If the difference is the 5th year and it's not even the full salary difference, I'm going to go, Boston's kind of interesting. I'm going to go somewhere I can win. The Lakers would be interesting. If the Lakers can actually open up that space, that's in it. I want to go somewhere where I can win and I don't have to do all the heavy lifting like I did in Charlotte, where he ran, every single possession was about Kemba by necessity, not because he's selfish.
I think too, in talking about Kemba to Dallas, right? That's been talked about. Let's say even Jimmy to Houston, right? Kemba to the Lakers, Jimmy to Lakers. Although I kind of like that one. For their team, obviously not for the 76ers, but I think a lot of times we're sort of linking these guys, but the Kemba to the Dallas thing doesn't really make sense to me, just because of Doncic's skill set. I would want him to have the ball as much as possible, and I think there's just this mad rush to put these super teams together still, and the Warriors, what made them so unique, and I'm going to talk about this a ton with Iguodala next week on the pod, but what made them so unique was just how all of their skill sets complement each other. So there's two sort of notions, player acquisition. Let's get a guy we'll figure it out later, i.e. Houston with Chris and James. That was a great example. Or it's a really sort of measured approach to how do these pieces fit? And I think there's got to be some talk, we have a max slot, but none of these pieces really fit. Should we divide that up between player X and player Y? Right.
Also, you need depth. You can't go into the playoffs with 4 good players, and it's hard. Unless those 4 good players are for the top 15 or 20 players in the league, it's hard. And the one ball, it's the one ball thing, right? There's only one ball, but it is interesting to think about Kemba and Dallas, because that's your first reaction, right? So Luka's their point guard, for all intents and purposes, he's their point guard. But then you look at LeBron has historically needed another guy who can take the load off him and create shots. And that's why Kemba to LA is kind of interesting as a new Kyrie for what LeBron is. So it is hard, but you're right. Golden State just found this magic of all the shooting they have, all the guys that are willing to work off the ball, Draymond's ability to play make, like that's just lightning in a bottle you don't get. But I think actually you guys, I was saying this all year, you guys in Philly seem to be in the we'll get guys. And now, obviously, Tobias is a very good shooter. You needed spacing. Jimmy ended up essentially as a point guard, and he needed a little bit of that
shot creation.
Yeah. But I thought along the way, Philly versus Milwaukee, like Milwaukee just went all in on fit. Like we have this one guy, everyone else is going to be a shooter to some degree. I mean, Bledsoe obviously is hit or miss a little bit, but they went all in on fit, and you guys went more towards the talent. And that would have been an interesting playoff series to see. But I think in the end, you guys, the fit was better than people anticipated.
I think we worked the fit out, but I think also the depth part, you brought it up, and like the depth part is huge. I think it was, if you looked at the Toronto series, right, the minutes that Joel was on the court versus off the court,
it's one of the best stats ever.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't remember what the exact stat was.
I think it was like plus 90. Or one of them was in the 90s, whether it was plus or minus. It was like some enormous, cartoonish figure.
Obviously, that will be a huge piece for us or for the 76ers, in free agency, is just figuring out someone to fill those minutes. But yeah, I think that I always thought it was going to be us and Milwaukee in the conference finals. Like, and I would have enjoyed sort of playing in that series. That would have been a good series. Were you surprised at all? Toronto won?
No. They weren't. Well, I mean, obviously.
No, I mean, when you get to the finals, and obviously, Kevin's going to miss some time, and Clay hurts his hamstring. Like at that point, no surprise. But let's say coming into our series,
I picked them to win your series.
Thanks.
Sorry.
I think there was only one person from the ESPN panel that picked us to win.
Me.
It was not you.
I picked them to go to the finals before the playoffs. But okay. I'll tell you what happened though. The next round, I waffled and I picked Milwaukee because in Game 7 of your series, they just reached a point where nobody else wanted to shoot the ball except for Kawhi. And I watched that game and I was like, boy, if this is how these guys are reacting to a pressure moment, like I don't know if I can trust them to beat. I don't know if they're as good as I thought. And obviously you guys are better than I had thought. But that game freaked me out a little bit about Toronto. But their ability to just kind of shed that. And Kyle comes out in Game 1 against Milwaukee. Now they lose, but he comes out in Game 1 and has 30-something. And he's like, I'm back. It's fine. We're good. Like, I'm good to go. It was impressive.
Hang tight, Zach. We're going to hear from our sponsor. With 2/3 of guys experiencing noticeable hair loss by age 35, most guys assume losing their hair is inevitable as they age. Some don't care, some shave their heads, some embrace hats. But what they don't know is that there are FDA-approved medications designed to stop hair loss and even regrow hair. That's why we're excited to partner with our sponsor, Roman. Roman makes it easy to get safe, FDA-approved hair loss treatment, all from your phone or computer. And when you go to getroman.com/Redick, your online visit is free. You can consult with a U.S. licensed physician through their secure online platform. There's no awkward conversations with receptionists or reading bad magazines in the waiting rooms. Once your doctor ensures that treatment will be safe and effective for you, Roman's dedicated pharmacy can ship your medication to you with a free 2-day shipping in discreet packaging. If you're noticing unwanted hair loss, starting treatment early is key, and Roman can help. And today, Roman is giving the JJ Redick podcast listeners a free online visit at getroman.com/Redick. That's getroman.com/Redick. For a free visit to get started, go to getroman.com/Redick. And now back to my conversation with Zach Lowe. All right, changing gears a little bit, but I think it was in March, you wrote an article, maybe it was February, right before I came on your podcast, about the fuckery in our league.
No, it was in the off season.
It was the off season?
You're talking about my absurd Hall of Fame, which you didn't like.
Was that the off season?
Yeah.
Jeez, it's been a long season.
It has been a very long season. It really has been. Remember when Orlando was up 1-0 against Toronto?
Yeah, I do. The amount of crazy storylines in our league, part of what makes it so entertaining. Let's just call it in the last year or 2 years, like what do you think is the most bizarre thing? And I'll give you some time.
Do you want me to do a Sixers only category, or do you want me to just do league wide? Because the Sixers The Sixers have had a lot of moments. I don't want to belabor those. We all know what they are.
But my point to this is like the season's over, right? And then there's this like this unfortunate like hit piece basically on Chris Paul and the Rockets.
Oh,
right?
I thought you were going to call my piece a hit
No,
piece.
No. It was a hit piece on Chris. I'm sorry. I'm just going to call it what it was. And then the Rockets are in dysfunction, and then like so Al Horford opts out and the Celtics are in dysfunction, and it's just nonstop. It seems like, and I in my mind the craziest story. I sort of lived through it, and it's still ongoing, and that's with sort of just the Markelle thing, and that to me is like, and number one, it's like I'm hopeful at the same time. Obviously, I think everybody is hopeful, but living through that was one of the strangest things that I've ever sort of experienced in my career.
That's certainly when I said a Sixers only category. I mean that's at the top of the list. That's at or near the top of the list. Houston is sort of like run of the mill dysfunction. Like you could have seen that one coming. The AD thing was a little bit of a circus, like even to the point of wearing this stupid T-shirt, which then of course he predictably says was picked out by a stylist, as if you can't pick out a T-shirt by himself. You
actually do know that the stylists pick out every game outfit.
I know that's okay.
No, obviously he had to put the T-shirt on his own body.
Yeah.
But
you have veto power.
Like if you're on a 5-game road trip, someone like if you have a stylist, they part of the package of what you're paying for is they pick out your outfits and then they pack your bags for you. No, I do not have a stylist. I just know this from talking to because I've asked guys like what are you exactly paying for? And the fees, oh my God.
You got money to light on fire if you need someone to pick out your clothes. Especially if it's T-shirts. Like I have T-shirts. Here's a pile of T-shirts. I put them in my suit. Now suits that you need tailored, they need to be fitted, and like you need to know what kind of like that stuff. Fine, okay. I'm trying to think what other bizarre things have happened. The Celtics saga is bizarre, but that's like basketball bizarre. I don't know. I'd have to get some time to think about the truly.
I should have texted you this beforehand.
No, I'm looking through the standings.
I feel like in a weird way you're just leaning towards the Sixers. I don't know why I feel like that.
Well, I'm on your podcast. You're still for 72 more hours. You're the early Jim Boylan mutiny in Chicago was like a fun 96 hours. That was a good one. Yeah. Like they almost didn't show up, and then there were push-ups involved, and maybe I'm making up the push-ups part, but there was
what's the committee called?
Oh, the Leadership Council. That was delightful. That was delightful. That was good. That was a good call. I think it still exists. I think it's still going.
No, just it's a lot of crazy stuff.
Joel, what did Landry Shamet say about Joel? Didn't Landry come out and say that it was his job to get like 17 milkshakes or something?
Thing. I actually, so I don't know that I've ever actually seen Joel drink all 4 of those milkshakes. But yes, there was
Chick-fil-A makes milkshakes?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
There's some whipped cream on top.
Okay.
They're phenomenal. But yeah, he had to get Joel, X amount of chicken sandwiches, X amount of fries, and then some milkshakes. But most of the time the milkshakes got taken to the back and somebody else consumed them, non-player. So these crazy stories are happening.
Braun showing up with wine to a game.
That was
a good moment.
That's a good one. Yeah, I would love to get to the point in my life where I have 0 fucks given, and that to me is just the ultimate boss move, to show up to a game with a glass of red wine.
Yeah, a goblet, goblet of red wine. The night of the Porzingis trade was crazy. Like when all of that was breaking, when it went from Porzingis had a meeting with New York and expressed discontent to wait, he's out, he's on Dallas, what's happening? Like that was a wild 3 hours.
Is dysfunction the new normal, or do we just hear about shit more?
I think everything's a story now. So like a good example, I think, was the Minnesota practice with Jimmy, which you've talked about on your podcast with him and probably even heard more about.
And Derrick Rose writes about in his book that basically it was exactly as Jimmy described, of just basically him shit talking, trying to get people motivated. He took one shot. It was a layup, and everybody lost their mind.
I mean, that was a bizarre first month of the season with all the Jimmy stuff. But like that practice, now I don't know, I'm not an NBA player, but there were some players who subsequently came out and said, well, it's not that unusual to have like a contentious practice and some mouthing off here and there. And then some people said it was. And then you had the Wizards thing where Wall cursed out Grunfeld or one of Wall. Like,
yeah, but
someone
to me,
got
this is
fined
all just normal.
That's what I'm saying. Now,
It's
but
all
now it's
just normal.
Now it's a story. Now some people are leaking it to, and every mini scoop within a scoop within a scoop is now a pat on the back. So everything comes out now.
Which brings me to a very much larger sort of conversation about the role of media right now, the relationship between players and media, and really like a disconnect, I think, between players and media in terms of like the large portion of what I would describe as media, meaning the people like yourself or Kevin Arnovitz, the writers from The Athletic. Like there's people, I think a lot of people actually with genuinely good intentions in terms of putting meaningful content and meaningful stories. And then there's certainly writers and team bloggers that, are trying to create clickbait. Like that's just the world we live in now. And then the other part of this, and Andre and I talk about this next week too, is like the other part of this is the aggregation of headlines and how headlines sort of get twisted. And then all of a sudden, a guy will say, well, I'm not talking to this outlet anymore. Or I'm not going to give any quotes anymore. I'm not going to deal with the media because my words got twisted. But it wasn't necessarily because a media member twisted it.
Right.
The specific writer twisted it. It was, let's say Bleacher Report runs a headline, and then a couple Instagram accounts pick it up, and before you know it, the headline got twisted. And that's the world you live in. How do you feel about that?
It's stressful. I mean, there's also the sort of art of the one source story where you get a famous player by yourself for 2 minutes and he says something to you that's interesting. And you have to decide, it's both interesting and perhaps a little self-serving for that player. And you have to decide, is this a story or am I just now a vessel that's carrying this message? And this message, by being made public, is going to create all this other earthquakes worth of stuff that is not favorable for the team or for that particular kind of story is hard to do, or it's arranged interviews through agencies or PR.
I don't think anybody's surprised to hear that.
No. I'm saying you can get good access, but I don't do those a lot because I'm going to write a more complete story that's going to have stuff that they don't like, and then I'm going to get yelled at. And I just don't have an hour in my day to get yelled at by this person anymore. But I have to be more careful about what I say on my podcast, because sometimes when you get rolling and it's exciting discussion, you might use a word that is too strong for what you actually know to be true, or and then that, or that you haven't made the right implication. It's a machine, man. It's hard.
Well, a lot of what you write to is like the deep dive.
Yeah.
And, you'll say to me hey, I'm coming to Philly to write an article, just a heads up. Right. And I'm aware, I don't really know what you're sort of going for. And a lot of times, if you have a sit down with, let's say, a coach, there are some parameters hey, this is sort of the arc of the story, or this is the context of what I want to talk about. But I would assume, just given sort of the complete picture that you try to paint, that there's negative feedback afterwards.
Oh yeah.
Where you're getting calls or texts from players, coaches, agents, whoever, PR people from teams. What the fuck did you just write?
It happens. It hasn't been as bad this year as it's been in the past, because, I think most people get it. I'm not, if you're expecting me to come do a puff piece on your team, everything's great, everything's okay, and the objective reality is not true, or somebody says something to me on the record that's inflammatory or interesting or controversial, that's not my fault. That's then I got to take that to other people, and they get it. If I'm going to interview a coach or a player and there's a sensitive topic, I will tell that person hey man, look, I'm not doing my job if I don't ask this question. So I'm going to ask it to you at some point. I don't play the gotcha game unless it's really necessary to play it. I'm not going to just spring something crazy on people, but I'm going to look, I gotta address this. And also, if you don't address it, let's say it's an X's and O's thing, or it's just something I interviewed Ben during your Toronto series about the dunker spot for about 90 seconds, about how he's in the dunker spot so much. He has an option in that he can address it any way he wants, or he can not. And if he doesn't, then I'm going to. That's because I I have ownership of what I see on the floor. So it's like if you don't address it, if you don't comment it, that doesn't mean it goes away. It's just now left to me to analyze in my own voice. And sometimes that's not the case with every reporter. So that kind of catches people off guard sometimes.
What did Ben say? Well, I can't remember what his quote was.
He said
that's not the best use of my skill set or something like that.
He said that's not something like that. It's not I can do more than that. That's not my role, but I'm going to try and help the team win. I'm going to do whatever it takes to help the team win.
But that's the right answer to give.
But there was also within it some honesty of that's not the role that I can play. I can do more than that, which is fair. Which is
I still think that's fair and it's truth.
It's truth. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. Now if he
but I'm sure that got twisted. I'm not positive of this, but I would guess somehow that got twisted in some forum to say Ben's unhappy, blah, blah, blah.
It didn't. And you know why? Because I knew that would happen. And so I put in parentheses after that quote, a sentence in my own voice to say, to be clear, Simmons is not irritated as he says these things, because he wasn't. He was smiling. He understood the question. He understood its implications. He understood what his answer was going to be. And he said it. And he expressed some mild discontent, but he wasn't out there killing Brett. He wasn't out there killing the team. He was telling his version of the truth, maybe more politely. No, not more politely. He was telling his version of the truth. And I knew that it could sound like he was irritated. And so I put that sentence in there precisely because I didn't want to create a shitstorm for him that he didn't deserve because he wasn't that irritated.
So a lot of players, if something like this happens and let's say that sentence is not put in
And I would fight for that sentence, by the way.
Sure, I know you would. I know you would. It's part of the reason you're on my podcast is because I know what your intention is, and I know what you're trying to do. But let's say that you didn't put that sentence in, and you're not Zach Lowe, and it gets written and it gets twisted, and somebody runs a headline. Ben's unhappy with his role, causing discontent with the Sixers in the middle of a playoff series, which is
Which is like going into game 7. It would have been going into game 7.
Which is kind of normal. That stuff happens quite a bit in our league. A lot of times when a story like that happens, a player goes on Twitter, sources say blah, 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 or, my words got twisted, fuck the media, whatever it may be. And there's it sort of creates this tension again between the media and players. And I'm wondering, so we're out there as players. I say we mean players. We're out there publicly complaining about sort of the media and the role of media. And by and large, I don't get the sense that you guys do that publicly. Maybe some people do. I wouldn't know. I'm not on
publicly complain about
players complaining about the media or twisting words.
Players can do whatever they want.
No. But I'm saying do writers, do you guys, I guess, do writers, do media members, do you guys talk amongst each other oh, this is getting bad? Or do you complain to each other about sort of the extremes to which some players go?
No, I mean, a little bit. There's always...
You just accept that it's part of it.
Yeah, it's not a huge subjective conversation. I don't think. I don't. You just have to navigate it. I'm actually just looking at my piece to make sure I had that sentence in there, and I'm not bullshitting. I said, there is no discontent in Simmons' voice. He's stating facts and taking issue more with the question than his role. Which, sure, it's not that big of a subjective conversation.
So, do you think that there needs to be any bit of reconciliation between players and the media?
That's hard. It's a hard question
because every player has a Twitter account and every player has an Instagram account, and we are in front of a microphone and a television camera nearly every day during the season, and for a lot of guys almost every day during the off season. We can sort of voice our displeasure at all times, and and that's just reality. And I do think that it's gotten bad. In my opinion, it's gotten bad.
There also needs to be an understanding.
There's a weird environment.
There needs to be an understanding of the moment, right? If I catch you after a heartbreaking loss where you're 0 for 12 and you miss a 3 at the end of the game, and I got to give you some leeway to be in a mood. If you say something in that moment that can cause issues with the team, I got to at least go to you and say, hey, man, I know this was a tough moment for you. You really want to say this? Or there has to be some understanding of going up to a player after a moment like that and just unfiltered, rage or whatever comes out. And you got to have some leeway for that.
There's a great example of that is after game 1 of the Brooklyn series, I didn't play particularly well. I played awful, actually. And I fouled out of the game. And I'm pretty sure the Philly crowd booed me off the court. And then, and then the next day I go in for my media session, and like I learned at a very young age you should not chew gum when you're publicly speaking. Like you're just not supposed to do it.
Yeah.
So I was chewing gum, and I did my media session, and I watched the video afterwards because I was like, what did Jackie say? So Jackie M was like in sort of the background. Jackie Mack was in the back, and she, wanted to talk to me, and it was actually about Joel. But I remember I got done with the session, and I started walking back on the court, and she's like, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something." It was a one-off, and she's like, "But I can see you're not ready. You don't really want to deal with the media, or you don't want to talk. I can't remember exact wording, but you don't want to talk right now. That's fine. We'll do it another time." And that's why I went back and I actually watched it without the audio. I was like, I want to watch that little 3-minute and 43-minute clip without the audio. If you turn the audio off and I'm chewing gum, my eyes are everywhere, my body language sucks. I was in a defensive position of anger, right? But my point to you is exactly what you just said, is just, having sort of the emotional intelligence to sort of get that. And that creates a sort of a level of trust, right, between the two. I think where the trust gets broken down is when the sources thing is weird, right? Like I brought up the Chris Paul, piece that, I can't remember who the writer was, but the one from like a month ago or 3 weeks ago about Houston, where it was like these sources come out and they're basically talking shit about Chris. And
that's the one where it said he demanded a trade?
That's part is not what I'm talking about. This Chris is like this, and then he did this, and it's like there's no sources from Chris's side saying anything else. So, anyways, my point to you is like that I think creates distrust. Like the other part is like when reporters sometimes play like a game of gotcha, with guys, and then after the fact you're like, man, fuck that guy.
So what is a game of gotcha from your perspective?
Where the questioning sort of leads a player into something that the player doesn't really want to say.
That's why I was careful with Ben. Ben was one of those ones I was like, look, man, you're in the dunker spot a lot. And I'm just going to ask you like a very dumb, basic question. Like, have you noticed you're in the dunker spot a lot, and what do you think about it? Because that is a leading question. I'm leading him into, it's very easy to go like, fuck, I'm pissed at Brett. I'm this and that. Like it's hard, but I can. So the gotcha. So that's what you mean by gotcha, is like if you sense that someone's trying to get you to say something inflammatory.
That, or like, listen, if you ask me a question on one day and I'm coming off a 9 for 12 game, and you ask me a similar question on a 2 for 12 game, and I might say something different about the same question, it has nothing to do with my shooting performance. Some of that is dependent upon my mood, right?
Yeah.
And you don't need to call me out for that. I'm not saying that's happened to me, but like, that's another game of gotcha. What I mean by gotcha is like just sort of like this sort of conniving like game of like, I'm going to find something to, again, go back to the clickbait thing. Like I'm going to find something to sort of clickbait. You're looking at me like that doesn't happen. That happens. This is not paranoia.
No, I believe that it happens. I believe that. But I'm less of a scrums guy. So I don't pay attention to the kind of stuff really that you're asked in scrums after games. And I bet that's where a lot of that happens is when there's 20 microphones around you and some outlet you don't even know who they are is hitting you with something.
Yeah. That to me is also part of is the amount of access and the amount of times in any given week that you're in front of the media. Like a lot of times you're bound to say something unless you're trying to just like, I'm just going to give the PC cliched answer. And like, ultimately, like I'm at that point where I'm like, I think I'm just going to play it safe. I'm going to play it safe. And again, those are the sort of the few reasons why I think there is that distrust. I'm going to switch gears. Last thing, I'm going to ask you to just give me a few things you're hearing regarding free agency. Just a few, like a few. Ooh. We're not going to call them Woj bombs. We're going to call them low bombs.
No, I don't do bombs, man.
I know you don't. But like, you're going to give me something here.
All right, let me bring up the team pages here.
By the way, do you feel like there's more chatter this year? Like there's more?
I do feel like there's more noise and more false noise.
Yeah.
Than ever
false,
before.
What do you mean by false noise?
I mean, innocent bad games of telephone where a rumor starts spreading around the league and so many people hear it that they think it's true, and then I don't think it's true. And I also think intentionally misleading information. being shared to try and throw people off the scent of what's real. I don't think that happens a lot. Like, I don't think that's a frequent thing, but it's just noisier. It's like clamorous. There's just a lot of clamor.
I think, even the stuff that's not public that I hear, it just seems like everything. And again, it could be just because of this free agent class, and you have guys like Kawhi and Katy, and that second tier are all all-stars and all NBA guys. So there's an inherent importance to this year's free agency class, but for whatever reason, it seems a little noisier.
It is interesting that we're now 48 or 70, whatever number of hours away, and the KD and Kawhi remain mysterious. Like, no one really has an inkling, and I'm not hiding anything. Like, I don't know where they're going. It would surprise me if it's anyone but Raptors or Clippers for Kawhi. There's like a little Lakers buzz happening. That would really, really surprise me. And KD, it's just kind of like, I guess we'll see. We'll see at 6:01. Let's see. Minnesota's up to something. Minnesota's up to lots of things. They've been linked to D'Angelo Russell. I think that's real. I have no idea how they're actually going to do it because they have no cap space, but I think there is some interest there. I think somebody in the league who I think is really smart predicted to me yesterday. We almost kind of made a bet about it. It's like, I'll bet you this. Minnesota is going to trade Wiggins, and they're going to win the trade. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, they are not going to have to pay to get off of Wiggins. It's going to be at worst a neutral deal, or someone's going to pay them to get Wiggins. And I said, okay, I'll take that bet. And we started floating possible Wiggins trades, but it got me thinking. I was looking like, who can they sucker into taking Wiggins? Who's their sucker? And now and I think there are some candidates. Like, if Kemba leaves, couldn't you see Charlotte trying to sell Wiggins? Is like, okay, so this is our hope now. We're going to get this guy who's the number one pick. He's athletic as all hell. I could see someone taking
Don't
Wiggins.
You think the public perception matters now? It matters more when you make these sort of deals?
For sure.
It matters to the owner.
Yeah.
It certainly matters to the GM because his job is on the line. I think it matters more.
I think it does. And that's why
the owners, there's a printout. So Kevin Pelton does the trade grades.
Yeah.
Every GM and every owner, they read those.
Yep.
They want to be in the B+ and up column and not the C- D+ column.
Yeah.
I think everybody sort of looks at that. It's interesting you bring up Minnesota. I know that. There's a few cat meetings with potential free agents that aren't public that I know about.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm kind of hearing the same thing. Minnesota's up to something.
Cat meetings?
Karl Anthony Towns.
Oh, like not meetings where like someone's cat is at the meeting.
There's a place that we used to go called Friend of a Farmer in Brooklyn Heights, and it is now a cat cafe. It's called Brooklyn Cat Cafe.
Like 2 or 3 years ago, that became a thing.
And my wife walked by it the other day, and she's like, "Oh, that's where Friend of the Farmer was. We should go there. Do you want to go there on a date night?" I'm like, "No, you don't understand. It is literally a cafe for cats. There's a cat in the front window right now."
And you're like, the idea is like, you pet the cats, like you
I'm
throw
not
a
a
little
cat person. I don't
throw
know.
balls to the cats.
Maybe you bring your cats there and they.
You know how scared
Cambodian milk. I don't know the mechanism of this.
My sister
cafe.
went. I think these became a thing in Japan first because my sister went to one like 5 years ago in Japan, and I was like, I'm sorry, she is a cat person. She has a cat. She would have more cats, I think, if it were up to her. And I was like, that doesn't sound. I don't really want like cat fur around like beverages and food. Like I'm not super into that. So cat meetings, that's interesting.
Quick interjection real quick. Chelsea and I, so when I got engaged to Chelsea and then she moved in with me, she had a cat and her name was Layla. And I'm not a cat person. So I was like, you can't bring Layla. And then Chelsea's mother convinced me like a year later, like we have multiple cats, we have a dog, like you got to take Layla. So we had Layla for like about a year and a half. This is when I played for Orlando. And then we ended up giving her away to someone we knew. Like 3 years ago when I was still on Twitter, there was I don't know if it still exists. There was a Twitter account called NBA Cat Watch.
My sister knows about it and is
it's
really excited
still going.
about it. I don't know if it's still going.
They contacted me. So my sister-in-law is a publicist. She's a legit publicist, actresses and models and all these different people. But I'm listed as like one of her clients, and so NBA Catwatch even reached out to her. They were trying to figure out sort of if we still own Layla, and they wanted to know the whole thing. There's people that are interested in cats and people that take their cats to cat cafes.
Oh, you can bring your cat.
I always assumed you would bring your cat. Like,
I
it's
thought
a cafe
they just had
for cats. Is that what it is?
They just have cats
I'm
there.
talking to Andrew, our sound guy.
I will never go to a cat cafe. I would go to a dog cafe before I went to a cat cafe, but a dog cafe is going to be messier. So Wiggins, I'm interested to see if they can sucker someone into taking Wiggins. No offense to Andrew Wiggins, but that'll be interesting. They're up to something. New regime.
But now that you've said they've suckered them, that's my point. Now you said someone's going to be suckered into taking Andrew Wiggins. You've just eliminated the potential. If there's any GM, well, no GM will listen to this podcast, but if there's anybody that like takes that quote and aggregates it, and all of a sudden Andrew Wiggins, right? The trade's not going to happen. So because now there's a public perception that whoever trades for Andrew Wiggins is a sucker.
Andrew Wiggins is selling. You can sell hope with Andrew Wiggins. You can sell. He'll figure it out here. Look at him jump and dunk.
You're pointing to your chest.
Number one pick. Like we'll put him in our system. He's still 23. Like I don't know. It's still very young. Like you can sell. Selling hope is a lot of what these kind of transactions are, particularly for teams that aren't very good. It's like how can we sell this as he's young and you know.
Which brings me up to one more point I just want to make about the selling hope, and I think this is really interesting because this is essentially where we are with a lot of teams right now. Is that they've sold hope, right? The Knicks are an example. Like we've sold hope on the summer of 19. Nets are in there, Clippers are in there, like. Then there comes a point in time where either you strike out and you've got to sort of scramble to figure out your next strategy, or, you know, you have to make sort of a big boy decision. And like Kevin Durant's a great example. Like, you know, he's coming off Achilles tear. I think you sign him no matter what, right? But there is a risk involved. So that's a big boy decision. You're past the point of selling hope. To me, it's easy to sell hope. It's easy to sell. It buys you time. It buys you 2 years, 3 years, whatever. I play on a team that literally did that for 4 years, 5 years? They sold hope, right? And then it comes a point in time where you make big boy decisions and there's real things at stake and people can lose their jobs over things like that.
Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris are big boy decisions for the team that you've played for that did the other thing for a while. Yeah, it's easy. Like you and I could be.
I wasn't talking about the Sixers necessarily in terms of the Elton big boy decision with the trade. I was just saying more in line with the selling.
Well, you and I could be the GM of a team and lose on purpose. It's not that hard. Like it's really easy. We could build a shitty NBA team.
But can you be savvy and collect assets?
Sure. It's not that hard. If you just want to trade people for draft picks, you can do it. If you want to lose a lot of games, you could sign no one and play the lottery. Like anybody can do that. Hire me, I'll do that for a while. To do what Sean Marks did and dig it out of the grave with no draft picks that you own is incredible.
Sure. I think you're right. The selling hope is the easy part. And that's my point. The selling hope is easy and anybody can do it. And then all of a sudden it's like you start making these decisions that are franchise altering, cap altering, and you can either go one of two ways. You end up, you know, being like Toronto. That was a big boy decision to trade for Kawhi.
Yeah.
And it paid off, right? And then there's sort of other examples. I'm not going to bring them up, but there's other examples where it doesn't work.
I'm interested to see what the team on the other end of the Kawhi trade does. Because there has been, you talk about noise, I don't think I've heard like one Spurs rumor. One. Other than like this vague general notion that maybe they would explore the trade value of DeMar and LaMarcus, which is like anybody would do that. That's not even a rumor. That's just like something you would do.
Right.
Like that, just nothing. And they got to figure out how do we like the team we have isn't good enough. How do we pivot forward? So that's, haven't heard word one about them really. I think Brogdon is really interesting. I think what happens to Malcolm Brogdon is really interesting.
But you haven't heard anything.
Oh, I've heard things.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. What have you heard?
I think Milwaukee has a number that's too high for them, and they're sitting there getting scared about where that number is going to come from, and they breathed a sigh of relief today when Boston emerged as the front runners for Kemba Walker, which I think is real and not fake. I don't think that's Kemba Walker's agent trying to leverage Charlotte into a bigger offer. I think that's real. I think he's going to leave Charlotte, and Boston is by far the front runner. So there goes the Malcolm Brogdon destination out the window. And so his market shrinks a little bit. I think Miami would love to get in on Jimmy.
Everybody's talking Houston though.
Everyone's talking Houston. I think Miami would love to get in on a similar transaction. And obviously they were linked to Jimmy when he escaped from Minnesota. For a minute there, that was like the hottest destination. You guys are your team is interesting. I think Orlando will keep Vucevic. How's that? That's not sexy at all. I think Orlando will keep Vuce.
All right.
I'll co-sign that. The Indiana Rubio stuff is really, really loud.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why. I mean, Ricky's a good player. I like Ricky. I don't particularly love the fit there. Atlanta, Chicago. Windhorst swears Chicago is going to hit Brogdon with a big offer sheet. I'm not sure that's true. But again, these things change day to day. Kevin Love. I don't think Cleveland wants to trade Kevin Love right now. For some reason, I think they like the idea of like we have the adult in the room. He can help he's a good shooter. He can help our young guards develop. I think they'll get religion on that and change course. Portland would love to get Kevin Love. Utah's interesting. All this noise about Favors and where they're just going to waive Favors and sign a stretch 4. Favors is good. Am I disappointing you? You want me to? It's like when I went on Get Up last week. Greenberg just asked me straight up, "Where's Kawhi going?" I'm like, "Whoa, I'm not going to give you that."
You gave me one. You said you think Vucevic going to.
I think
Orlando.
Vucevic goes back because they want to compete. They don't want to take a step back. Yeah. Dallas. It sounds more and more like Dallas is going to. Tim McMahon tweeted this today. Is going to be out on the big guys and just try to get 2-3 good players and that fit around Luka and Porzingis. Man, the West. Whew. The West is it's just every year. Sacramento is going to get a center, and it's not going to be Willie Cauley-Stein. They're going to sign a center. They could be good next year. They won 39 games last year. Stay in the East.
I don't know. I just feel like these predictions. I just feel like you're not giving me what I want. You're not giving me what I want.
What do you want? Where's Jimmy going to go? You know better than me.
Here's one. All right. What do you think if you had to guess like the 76ers starting lineup next year? Opening day.
Jesus. So it was the best lineup and one of the best lineups in the NBA last year.
I'm just asking you.
Like, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Jimmy Butler, JJ Redick, and player X, who I don't know. Not Tobias. That would be my guess.
Really?
That would be my guess. But I don't know who player X is. I don't know how they're getting him. I don't know what the mechanism is. But I think probably the safest guess is exactly the same, right? That like if you had to rank like likelihood, I think it's exactly the same. But it just feels like there's too many tremors of noise for it to be exactly the same.
Yeah, the interesting thing, and just again, I can't. I'm just legally obligated not to break any news. But the interesting thing to me is like the amount of, like you said, the contradictory noise.
Yeah,
that you're like, wait a minute.
And then
I found 2 days ago, player X to this team was a done deal, and now this, a different source or sometimes the same source will say, no, the player X. Do
you know how many times I've heard like Jimmy's the first priority? No, Tobias is the first priority. No, Jimmy's the first priority. No, JJ is the first priority. No, it's Jimmy doesn't want to go back. No, Tobias. Like, okay, whatever. What the hell? I don't know.
I'm not the first priority.
You're not the. I just threw you in there I'm on your podcast.
Thanks,
I threw you in there to do that.
But
it's so I just like you just got to sort out what's real and what's fake, and it's really hard.
It's exciting. We'll know in for us basically, yeah. 76 hours.
There was something.
We'll start hearing stuff for real.
Everyone's laughing at Houston. Not everyone. There's a segment of media that's like, this is a joke that Houston is trying to do this. They can't do it. It's impossible. It's just Daryl getting press. Okay, maybe. But I remember when Daryl told me in the 2017 finals, I've got something up my sleeve. I was like, oh, this is bluster. This is Daryl saying shit. But no, he had Chris. Chris was up his sleeve. That's what it was. So I don't put it past a GM like that to make it happen.
All right. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the JJ Redick podcast. Stay tuned. Next week, we have Andre Iguodala coming on the show.